planning. But I want to just do a little quick potted history of maybe how we got here. Urban planning used to have big debates, right, about, tunneling to the future, Victorian bridges, highways. There were raging debates, right? And there were controversies. There were people like Jane Jacobs and Robert Moses, and the big scale plans that sometimes disregarded some local people to the kind of nuanced communities and what they could be about. But we've just heard from people, residents and businesses, that light up our streets, that make them what they are, and yet they're being disregarded. And I think we need to get back to a proper discussion about urban planning. But it was Ken Livingstone in 1999 that said, "I hate cars, and if I ever get powers again, I'd ban the lot of them." Ken Livingstone hosted the first climate summit of 18 megacities in 2004-5 called C40 Cities. And we should remember that name when people talk about outsiders, because C40 Cities is now a very big international organisation of which a certain mayor of London is now the chair. In 2007, Mike Bloomberg got involved, and in 2015 it was taken to the UN COP21 Paris. So then all of a sudden, all of these ideas that are being promoted by C40 Cities get international backing. Now, at COP21, Carlos Moreno presented his idea of a 15-minute city, no pollution, no noise. And this kind of idea, it might sound, the no noise bit is a bit strange, right? But, obviously, as people have said, the question of pollution, you can discuss it, and what does it mean, and what is the real air quality? Not sort of bogus stats where you take them in a certain place and you consider them in a certain way, but actual, really robust data, and you can have a conversation about how people want to improve things. But these ideas that Marino presented basically got put on steroids as, we went through the terrible experience of the last few years, and we saw lockdowns. And it was Anne Hidalgo in Paris in 2020 that really got the kind of things working internationally that around the 20-minute city. And that kind of inspired different areas by leaders, not by citizens, in Dublin, Barcelona, Milan, and Lisbon. And we should be clear that there's a kind of intertwining between leaders and very big corporations who often promote some of these ideas. And just what then happens is you get a situation with companies like NREP, who then across the Nordic nations start implementing some of these ideas with low traffic neighbourhoods and 15-minute cities. So they build things precisely as we've heard now, without certain car parks, with the notion that you're going to live in a certain way. A lot of the different cities, county councils and city councils have signed up to these things. And it's really worth checking and seeing who has and what it means, because these all then get informed up and down the line, and they get a lot of backing financially. And we end up seeing these things that kind of basically are checkpoint Charlies across the country, right? In our towns and cities, all of a sudden, now, for instance, for me in London, it takes me double the time to see my disabled mother that it did do, and going through places that are often congested, as we've heard, and getting fines quite regularly. So Sadiq Khan is now the chair of C40 Cities, and his legacy, he wants it to be that we have many of these things across the country, as well as the ULEZ expansion, which again we're seeing, and it's worth relating this and about the kind of technocratic point, that even when 80% of people who respond to something say they don't want it, he then, in addition to discounting about 5,000 people who have responded and votes, then says, well, that's not really the right kind of response, so I'm going to do it anyway. Now, this is kind of becoming more popular amongst people that are leading, and I just think as citizens and as local residents that we really need to hold them to account. So it's just not acceptable. Boris Johnson was promoting the active travel. It's called many things: active travel, livable streets, these 15 and 20-minute neighbourhoods. They're kind of presented in certain ways, but he urged councils, and not only did he urge councils to consider low traffic neighbourhoods, but then started funding them to a tune of over 100 million, and then so that they would make money from them themselves. Now, we should be honest, and we've invited people to this, but when we do, and I think we could talk about it tonight, we should have a big public debate where everyone who has views on this is actually formally, properly requested to come and put their case forward. Because there are groups in the UK, like UK 100, and some of the cycling groups that are very actively funded and arguing to do certain things, but have somehow think that they should bypass the democratic moment. So all you people, everyone in this room, I just got to say how inspiring it is to see everyone, but we're told that it's done, the choices are made, this all happens, but it's not. And when you see you've got a room like this with people who are actually concerned, they want to, then you begin to see that it's not the case. And as we've heard, these 99 votes, of which 11 were in favour, you just think this is a travesty, and it is really infuriating. Now, Ealing, as I said, scrapped 7 low traffic neighbourhoods. It was demonstrated, like the discussion on ULEZ, it was being demonstrated, and like the points have been made about shifting traffic and further driving and just moving them to other areas, that actually it makes traffic worse, but has no impact on air. In some areas makes it much worse, and often it's the poorest sections of society are the most worse off, both in terms of the 15 and 20 minute neighbourhoods, where on the one hand they don't have services there, and even when you do, we know what it's like getting to see a GP or anything else. But in addition to that, where the air impacts are, and this is a very important point that's been made, that it's okay for here, but what about the consequences elsewhere? And I think these points need to be really made. There are a lot of challenges happening up and down the country. In spite of people saying, oh, it's just a few people, there are people, locals like you guys, residents and businesses that are actually, and some have been doing it for a couple of years, that are saying this isn't acceptable. But often you get a situation where you can get, the councils have got time and they've got money, our money, which they often spend on things, and people only have a certain amount of time and commitment. But, ladies and gentlemen, when we get involved together and start working on a concise way of how to challenge these things and bring them out, we can actually get changes made quite quickly. There's all sorts of ways that you can do that. One of the reasons we've got these Take Back Democracy and Free Our Streets points is that we think it's really, really important. Yeah, if you all want to hold them up, then we can show everyone, we'll have a little moment there, Paul, and you can flick it around. What we're all going to do, everyone, we're going to take back democracy. And what we mean by that is that the voices of ordinary people, like residents, locals, families, businesses, all get heard. And we don't want to have kind of being palmed off, sidelined, treated with contempt. But, often when people talk in policy terms about the public or the people, they talk about us in very negative ways. I said I came from hospitality originally, and I saw a lot of this in discussion about zones. Talk about us as almost that we're conveyors of bad things, of crime, or of terrible things to one another, when actually what we are is we're the people that make the country work. We light up the streets. And, in the past, we've had campaigns, and we saw effectively in Hackney, for instance, as an example, one of the views of councillors is that you're never really going to do anything and no one cares, and everyone's a bit stupid and dim and they can't be able to do anything. And they actually said to me, well, Alan, you've got all these ideas about how these things should happen, but when you go out and speak to everyone, they're just going to say we're not interested and you're going to be humiliated. I said, great, you know what, that's called democracy. So let's get them all out and let's do that. And what happened was 30,000 people in Hackney got involved in a campaign at the time called We Love Hackney. And they were shocked because they didn't realise that people cared so much, because actually what's happened is that people running things have stopped being accountable to people and actually listening. And that's the thing we need to get them back in the habit of doing and get into practice, and making sure that our thoughts, our concerns, our views, our ideas are heard properly and clearly. There's lots of things that make a great city. But one of the things, of course, at the heart of it is people. And us traveling together, meeting together, putting events on together, falling in love together, sometimes falling out of love. But fantastic boroughs, the heart and soul is always where people come together, not where we have barricades and blockades, not where we're getting fined and taxed to move around, not when people with mobility issues, we're elderly, our families, on the school run, where we aren't able to do these things. Now, these guys have spoken much more eloquently about those points, but these impacts, these costs are really monumental to us.